to a new episode of Writer's Bunkhouse, the official Four Horsemen publication podcast. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is my new friend, Chelsea Dunn. Chelsea, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thrilled to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, I am a Kansas Cityan, Kansas City, Missouri, so Chiefs side, if that helps. So very Midwestern over here. And I'm a mom, and I've got fur babies as well. So, you know, that's pretty much it. Midwestern, kind of a weirdo. I like to say I'm a KC weirdo. There's a whole thing going on. There's actually t-shirts and stuff where people around Kansas City are wearing them that say KC weirdo, and I clearly need one. So,
Tell me more about what's that mean?
oh, it's just, we're kind of a strange little spot in Missouri because
Okay.
Kansas City, I feel like, is even though it is really spread out for a city, it's got that really good urban vibe with like lots of arts and music and writers, and more like really progressive. Everyone wants to help each other out. It's a great community. And so, yeah. So we're a little weird here in the middle of the US, right smack dab, but that's okay.
Yeah, there is a whole if you go to Austin, there is these t-shirts, Keep Austin Weird.
Yeah.
So I get that, right?
Weird is the spice of life.
It is, absolutely. Is
Yeah.
that a thing?
It is a thing because there are two Kansas cities. There's Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. We're separate cities, but just kissing with the state line. So we like to share our sports teams because we all root for, the Chiefs and the Royals and Sporting KC.
Yeah.
Uh, and we share them, but there's kind of a rivalry going on about who's better. So it does definitely matter to us Kansas Cityans which side you're on.
The first time I was visiting as an adult Louisville, Kentucky,
Mhm.
and Jefferson, Indiana is like right across the river. And so many people would work in Jefferson but live in Louisville or
Mhm.
vice versa. And I said, how weird is it to live in one state and work in another state, but not like a 2 hour commute? I guess you guys are used to it, right?
Yeah, it is fun. And then also like it gives you, because there are things that Kansas and Missouri have that are different, but because we're right there on that border, we can
Hmm.
experience both really easily. So it is nice. I mean, it's a rivalry, but it's not anything more than just out of fun.
Rivalry, right?
Right.
Because, we have Dallas Fort Worth. And so, DFW, it's often just kind of thrown together. And
Right.
so Dallas is on the east, Fort Worth is on the west, Fort Worth, Count of the Towel, and so we kind of have that vibe as well, that where there's a Fort Worth and Dallas. So I get that a little bit.
Yeah.
Hmm. So where did you grow up?
I grew up right here. I've always been here in KC. I think that's probably part of the reason I really identify with it, even though, I mean, I've traveled and gone to other places, but I love Kansas City. And that's actually part of the reason I based one of my book series in Kansas City, was kind of to highlight some of the good and bad parts of the city. But yeah, I've always been here.
Did you had no desire to explore or move away from the hometown?
Oh, I mean, I had desire. So originally, when I was finishing high school and heading into college, my thought process was I would
Okay.
get a degree in vocal performance and travel the world, was my hope. But I instead had my oldest daughter. And so I hunkered down and stayed around family. I didn't get the degree in vocal performance. I do have a college degree, but in something different. And I've always been a writer, just maybe not as focused as I am now, but I just kind of kept doing creative things, maybe not singing necessarily, but other creative avenues instead.
Well, Chelsea, my day gig in podcasting is a music podcast. So I do set listing Bruce. So there's no way we're not going to talk a little bit more about how did you when did growing up, and I'm going to be in Kansas City, finding Midwest, let's just say Midwest, finding opera, getting a passion for it. You got to tell me that story, please.
Okay, so I've just always loved singing. My mom liked to joke that I just was born singing. I would stop everyone at like age 2 and 3 at family functions and get up on a table and say, "Excuse me, everyone, I have a song that I need to sing." So I've always been, always did at the age of 8 or 9. I really enjoyed singing choral music, especially like at church. So, because there was somebody at the church who saw how passionate I was about singing, she had a connection with the Lyric Opera. And so, the Lyric Opera of Kansas City had a children's program and they would have a camp. It was a 2 week long camp every summer. It that my parents were like, "All right, let's try it out. Let's see if Chelsea likes it." So I went, absolutely fell in love. That was the camp I went to every single year. And because you went to that camp, you would get invited to opportunities to audition for the children's chorus for the lyric for various performances. So I auditioned. Every time I was given the opportunity, I auditioned and I was in several main stage performances. And then I was also part of there's kind of an initiative at a certain point. There's a female composer who made children's operas. She wrote two that I was involved in. And then we would travel around to various, mostly schools in the Kansas City area and perform them. One of them is called One False Move, which is about female bullying in school.
Okay.
Since it's a little more subtle than male bullying,
Yeah.
kind of to spread awareness. So it was about spreading awareness, but then also inviting kids who might find, be passionate about singing and performing to audition and join the camp as well. So yeah, I did that all throughout grade and high school.
Do you remain passionate about opera and music?
Oh yes. I mean, I've always loved music, huge part of my life. I love pretty much every genre of music. And I sing constantly. My children tell me I'm too loud. So, you know, it is what it is.
Well, growing up, obviously, you were involved in your church, but was there a lot of music in the household?
Absolutely. My
Hmm.
dad was a big music guy. So he was in bands when he was younger. And then him and his best friend used to make music in the basement once a month, some of which they recorded. But there was constantly music playing in the house. And my mom was also, she loved singing. She never did anything professionally, but she loved singing and often actually sang songs for friends' weddings. So yeah, music was huge at my house.
How about reading? And because I often ask people, especially writers, did you grow up reading? Was it something that was important to you?
So funny enough, I felt I struggled to read for a while. And it wasn't until I was maybe like 10 or so that I really started enjoying reading. And I attribute that wholeheartedly to my grandfather. He
Tell,
is a huge
yeah,
reader.
tell that story.
Yeah, he's a huge reader. And so since I was struggling so much, he took it upon himself to take me to the library and
Hmm.
we would check out the same book and read it at the same time. So I had a miniature book club with my grandfather where we would discuss the book. And we just kept going until I found things that I liked. Like he just didn't give up. He was like, "We're going to find something you enjoy." the book that made me fall in love with reading, or the books that made me fall in love with reading, is
That was so perfect.
it's the Chronicles of Narnia. So
Okay.
yeah, that was falling into the fantasy of all of that. And the fact that the kids were in an age range, at least at the beginning, that I was in, it was perfect. And it had so much material for him and I to discuss as well, because he delved into meaning and symbolism and things like that with me as well. Because he didn't want to dumb it down just because I was a kid, which I appreciated.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever watched Bruce Springsteen on Broadway that's on Netflix. Okay, so they filmed his Broadway show. He did a one-man show on Broadway, and I'll spoil a little bit of it. He talks about that as a young man, he was born to run, got to get out of this town. He says, I currently live 5 miles from my home where I was born. He said, born to stay, no one would have bought that crap.
Well, yeah. Well,
So, things change. You decided to opera became a love, a passion instead of career. So, talk about, had you always been a writer though? Had you always told stories?
yeah. So basically, as soon as I fell in love with reading and saw that there were stories like that I could just fully dive into, and it was like a movie going on in my head instead of just reading words on a page,
Sure.
I really wanted to write my own stories. And I'd always been a kid who played pretend a lot and on
Okay.
my own mostly. So I was really good already at making storylines. I wrote lots of little things. Some of them, I mean, obviously kid level, so not
Sure.
great. Um, but yeah, just wrote tons of stuff. One of my book series right now is the first book I ever finished writing, which I wrote in high school. I cleaned it up and made it a lot better. Better writing now that I'm an adult, but the story is the same. And so yeah, it's always been something been super passionate about, just telling stories, which I think translates to the music. Is I liked telling stories on the stage as well. So
E- So, can you remember the first thing you wrote that you said, yeah, this is pretty good, either from your own satisfaction or feedback from people?
the first thing I wrote that I think I considered to be pretty good was this is a very niche thing.
Okay.
If anyone remembers the Alice in Wonderland horror game, it was like early 2000s. But anyway, it was a horror game. She is crazy, but goes back to Wonderland and it's all twisted.
Okay.
Okay, it's a video game. I played that game with my friends and wanted the story to continue
Okay.
because it kind of promised a continuation. So I basically wrote a screenplay for that, which is kind of out of my norm because I wasn't a screenplay type
Hmm.
writer. But my friends at the time, of course, they were all my age. So, it, you know, take that
Yeah.
with a grain of salt. But they all really enjoyed it. Obviously, I didn't do anything with it. I just kind of handed it out to my friends at the time, and we all enjoyed that. I think the one that I was the most proud of was the book I finished in high school, which is Bloodthirsty, the first book in one of my series. And yeah, I had lots of people read that one. And
Okay.
for the most part, they said the story was good. You know, older people in my life who read it obviously saw flaws in some of the writing. So I'm glad that I decided to bring it back, but liven it up with more mature, better skills.
Chelsea, was there a road to Damascus moment when you decided that you wanted to get published and you wanted to share your writing with others?
Yeah. So
Okay.
when everything shut down, I was still working the whole time because my husband and I worked at a restaurant at the time. So considered essential. I was the office manager for that restaurant,
Okay.
but I was working a lot. My kids had to be home because schools were closed. I needed something good to escape with. I did a lot of reading at first, rereading of some of the book series that I loved the most, like comfort books.
Okay.
I remembered that I had started writing something like 10 years prior, and I had written probably 80% of a book and then stopped writing it for whatever
Hmm.
reason. So I was like, I'm going to go back and read it and see what it's like. So I reread it, exploded in my head. I could see everything maybe that I was missing the first time I started writing it. And I realized that there's actually a story that came before that that I needed to write. In less than a month, I wrote By Moonlight, which is the first book in my By Moonlight series. The book that I had written 10 years prior, I finished that up, and that is the second book in the series, Moonbound. I started writing the third book in the series, and it was at that point when I had started writing it that I was really like, I think I might have something here. I had ideas for like more story after this third one. I was really invested in the characters and like I said, I had based it in Kansas City. So I was, I'm super familiar with the city and I have passion for that. And I think I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. So I tried to clean everything up as best as I can because I was like, if I'm gonna be submitting at two of these books, I want these to be pristine. So I spent
Sure.
time doing that while I was researching publishers and literary agents because they always say you have to have a literary agent to even get looked at by a publisher. Thank goodness that wasn't the case for me.
Oh,
But, the inquiries, submitted a ton of them. And that's something that I tried to stress to other people who are aspiring authors is like, yeah, I submitted tons of inquiries to publishers and literary agents. I mean, it was every day, several of them over and over again, and sometimes just never even getting a response. But thankfully, finally got a response from Four Horsemen. They loved what I had sent them just as much as I did. And thank goodness for it. Because, yeah, I was just like, this is definitely something here. I have tons of story starts and scenes and other ideas that I've thought in my head, but I always kind of put everything to the back burner. But I'm glad I pushed myself to do that.
so tell me your elevator pitch for your series.
Which one?
Well, let's do both.
Okay. So the By Moonlight series, the one that is the first series I started getting published, that kind of jump started everything, is about a locksmith in Kansas City. Her name is V, and she is also an empath. But in this world, there are supernatural creatures, but empaths are not something that's familiar to anyone, even in that supernatural community. So even though she's aware of all the others, she keeps to herself. She doesn't really want to be involved in the drama that's involved with all of that and tries to be perceived as human. Unfortunately, one night she, with her powers, can feel that a girl is changing into a werewolf in public and doesn't seem to realize that she was going to change. So she decides to save that girl and her friends and subsequently exposes herself to the werewolf community and the leader of the werewolf pack, Shane. Some sort of were creature is killing people in a straight line across the country that seems to be heading straight toward Kansas City. Now she has to deal with that as well as the werewolf pack. So that's the start.
Supernatural.
Why supernatural? It's a good question. I think I love the idea of being more than you seem. I think I've always really enjoyed books and media in general that has magical elements to it. So anything beyond human. But I think, as you know, I was the kid who stayed up late to watch X-Files when I was way too young to do so. I read Anne Rice books when I was way too young, that sort of thing. I just really enjoy that, like the dark, creepy, scary aspect, but also just the magic that you can do things that are way beyond what humans are capable of. So there's,
Buffy and Angel?
oh, of course. I have.
I watched the Woody Allen documentary about how he behaved with his stepdaughter. And I was like, how can anyone even stand to watch a Woody Allen film? And then all the crap came out about Josh Whedon.
Oh, I
And I
know.
was like, but I still love Firefly, right? Like, and all of a
Okay.
sudden, I then became less judgmental of understanding separating the art from the artist, right?
Exactly. All that Joss Whedon stuff like broke my heart. I was
It
like,
broke my heart.
I
Yes. Yeah, anyway, okay. Yes, of course. Buffy, Angel. There we go. That is awesome. All right. So, what's the other series? And
so
this
my
is the one that originally came from when you were in high school, correct?
yeah.
Okay. So, tell me that one, Chelsea.
So that this series called Dead Man's Hand. The first book in the series is Bloodthirsty, the original first book I ever finished writing. And it is about a war between immortals, more supernatural creatures,
Okay.
vampires, werewolves, witches, and then these creatures that I called chinjas. And they're also shapeshifters, but they're different in that they can literally shapeshift into anything. So not
Okay.
just living things. Ace is the main character, and she is a vampire assassin, so an assassin for the vampires. And she stumbles upon a prophecy that could mean the end of everything, not just the war, but everything that the werewolves are planning. So she embarks on her own little journey to try and figure out how to keep this from happening, which involves forming an alliance with the werewolf leader's son. She's also having kind of a strange love triangle go on with another vampire and her sire. She has been very duty bound for hundreds of years and not wanting to be in a relationship with him. But he is very serious about getting back with her. So that is also going on. A little romance to sprinkle in with the immortal chaos and prophecy.
Is there romance in the other series?
Yes, there is romance. There's some romance between V and the werewolf leader, Shane.
Okay.
So,
So you like to have a little romance with your supernatural?
I
Of
mean,
course.
Buffy, come on.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. That's great. What has surprised you as you're telling these stories? Is there something that your characters have done that you've kind of gone, oh, I didn't see that coming?
Um, there's been a couple of times where I wanted to go down one path, like especially with the more recent By Moonlight book. I was planning on Shane doing something from what he did, and he apparently decided that he needed to do this other thing, which is fine. I guess that leaves more characters for later use, but I was hoping he'd kill somebody off for me.
Isn't that interesting how that works?
Yeah, it's funny when you say that people are like, you're nuts. The characters take on a personality of their own. Like, yes,
Yeah.
they started with pieces of things here and there that I cobbled together, and some aspect of me goes into V. But they're all at this point, once I've gone this far, and I have 4 books in that series now, they're very much their own beings. They just kind of live up here instead.
When um, I was at a book signing years ago with Lawrence Block, who wrote Matthew Scudder's, books, and the main character Matthew Scudder's is an alcoholic, and he in one of the books he starts having an affair with someone, and he's in a committed relationship with Elaine. Elaine is a former sex worker. At the end of the book, she starts talking about how much she loves Matt. She says something along like, I love you, and the love you give me is more than I could ever want. I don't need anything else from you. At the book signing, I raised my hand and I said, Mr. Block, I think that means Elaine knows that Matt's cheating on her, but she doesn't say it. Do
Right.
you think that's, well, and so that's my question. Does
Yeah.
she know? And he goes, I think she does. Or
Yeah.
she knows she's aware enough of the foibles of men, being a former sex worker, that he might be doing something. And her
Hmm.
point is that in their point in relationship, she's getting everything she needs from him, right?
Right.
And I was fascinated that he didn't just say, yes, she does, or no, she doesn't. He's like, I think she does. As in, I'm going to learn when I write the next story where this is at.
Yeah.
And I love that because you hear the talk about, often writers like yourself say, the characters are in my head, right? And they will say, no, I don't want it. No, can't do that. Nope, nope, don't want to do that. But no, 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 I need you to do this. Nope, telling you, not going to work.
Exactly. Oh no, there's been a couple of times where I tried so hard to force it, and it made the writing process go so much longer because instead of just flowing with the story and
Mhm.
going with how they want it, I end up going back and doing it the way, all right, fine, we're not doing it. Then suddenly everything flows. Like all of the other ideas pop in my head the way they're supposed to. It's
And
part of the reason why I don't consider, like, I have an outline, I have things I want to happen, but I also let it happen organically too, because sometimes the characters will make their own decisions.
and I think if you want to put it in a more logical way, which we don't have to, is that's your creative mind, your subconscious muse working through these things that are seeing roadblocks before you do, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is, and I can't, I'm going to get it wrong, but Roseanne Cash was telling the story, and I can't remember if it was her or someone else, but they were asking her about creativity and your muse. And she said that either her or someone else was in the car and this idea for a song came, and it was so strong. And either the person or Roseanne looked up and like, I'm driving, can't you tell? It's like, not now. I don't have anything to write it down, right?
That
So yeah.
happens. That happens. And then like I'm like, thank goodness I have a phone that can do a voice recording these days.
Yes.
Because back before that, it'd be like, well, it might be gone by the time I get where I'm going.
Is there anything you haven't gotten to do yet creatively that you're still intrigues you? Is there something else you want to do creatively that you haven't been able to do?
I really do like the idea of making music or making some sort of stage play with music incorporated into it. While I can read music and sing, I don't play any instruments of my own. So I would be very dependent on someone else to help me with that. That is a partnership that I'd like to find at some point, but I would need an idea for that first. But because I spent so much time on the stage when I was younger, I think I would love to do something like that. Maybe some point in the future, I'll be able to make that happen.
Are your characters musical? Is there a musical theme in your books?
Not in Dead Man's Hand, but V talks sometimes in there about music taste. And actually, there's a big scene in the third book in the series where V asks Shane what his favorite kind of music is because she realizes that they never had that discussion. And she's like, how can I be with somebody and I don't even know what kind of music they like?
Hmm.
I love this scene because this one came out of nowhere. This was a scene that it came to me by itself, but it's kind of cute and pivotal for their relationship. And he actually goes into, since he's pretty old, since he's a werewolf,
Yeah.
about how when he was a teenager, his favorite song was How High the Moon, but sang by, oh shoot, 1 second.
Sorry.
I will find it 1 sec.
Okay.
The
Okay.
more popular version was sang by a white singer, but he talks about how Ella was the first to sing it and record it and how he just liked her version better and liked her voice better. But because he's a werewolf, hearing old recordings, he can hear all the flaws from vinyl scratches and poor quality, and it bothers him more. So he doesn't listen to that song anymore. But so then she's like, so your favorite kind of music is jazz? And he said, yes, it's jazz. So that's one of my favorite little scenes between them. So
Does she figure out a way to clean up a version and give him a digital copy?
not yet, but a little Easter egg that so it's known, it's in the books that he's
Yeah.
proposed. So they're planning on getting married at some point in this series. And I'll just give you this little spoiler that
Shh,
that's
no one
on her
listen.
list.
Yeah.
That's on her list for maybe a wedding present.
Nice. That's good. I was just curious, maybe if you had a siren or some musical thing with as much music has been part of your life. I was just a little surprised you didn't have kind of a person with musical ability as part of the characters.
Well, so V's powers are fairly unknown. He starts it off as an empath, but because they're not even quite sure what type of supernatural creature she is in this series, each book her powers are growing. Um, she's discovering new things about herself. But one of the things in the second book, she has this ability with her voice to basically wipe out the magic of other creatures. So
Oh,
she can
nice.
decimate them with her voice.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's
nice. There we go. And very cool. So, Chelsea, is what haven't I asked you that I should have?
well, well, I do have the second book in Dead Man's Hand is coming out.
Tell me a little about it.
So at the end there's a ritual for that prophecy that ends the first book. And in the second book, we're basically seeing the aftermath of how all the different immortal be groups are dealing with that. They're all weakened from it, and the vampires are a little bit ahead. They came out more on top than the other three. So it's 10 years later, and Ace is just kind of trying to see what's going on. So they've continued to keep the other ones in this weak state. She realizes that there is some sort of rift between the witches and werewolves, which were previously allies. And it's all due to some sort of summoning that the witches are planning to do. And so they're trying to figure out what the witches are trying to summon. They know it's some sort of shadow demon. And at the same time, one of the oldest vampires clearly knows something, but isn't letting up on what it is until it's almost too late. So,
What you've kind of talked about some stage, maybe working. Is there a different genre you have interest in for writing?
yeah, I'd like to do some sci-fi. I
Okay.
have some starts of things from years ago that is a sci-fi trilogy. It would still have dark themes because I clearly can't help myself. Uh, But yeah, I'd like to do a little bit of that. I know that's different than
hmm
the paranormal romance type stuff I've been doing, but still would have dark themes. And I think that it would be well received. I enjoy all the genres of stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm a big sci-fi nerd too.
very nice. Do you want to tell the story about your tattoo?
Which one?
Yeah, the
Oh,
one I noticed, right? You did. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I actually got this before I got published or anything. This is for Ace. She has this tattoo. I guess it was a sort of a promise to myself at some point that I would actually get that one out there since
Hmm.
it was the very first thing I'd written and a promise to my younger self. And I actually have a dedication in there that is to my younger self that we did it and we got it published. So,
That's nice.
yep.
All right. I'm going to ask you in a minute how people can reach you and some final thoughts, but you did have some homework. So, one of the things I'm doing in these series of episodes is I'm asking writers to share with me and the listeners what are some of their best favorite, best written songs. Not necessarily your favorite song, not necessarily your most popular song, but a song you think is well written, well crafted, tells a story, whatever you want is your kind of, thoughts and your criteria. So, Chelsea, do you got a couple for us?
Yes. So when you asked me that question, the very first thing that popped into my head was The Story by Brandy Carlisle.
Okay.
And that I think not only it just is so soulful the way she sings it, and every point in that song, the lyrics, they are meaningful. It's a love story, but also if you listen to interviews that Brandy's done about it, she talks about how it's also about, her empowerment, how she feels about being a powerful, independent woman and the struggles, but also that she is who she's supposed to be. And I've always just really identified as well as it being a good song that like hits me right in the chest every time I hear it.
That's a great choice. I had 4 or 5 um, Bruce Springsteen fans on. They were all women and they had all bonded over Springsteen shows and they had all gone together and everything. But they had a sub thing of Brandy Carlisle. They sent me afterwards playlists of songs for me to get into her. Jason Isbell has been my latest obsession. I just love his music, but I agree, Brandy is just something special. She
She's
really, really is good at what she does.
She is
Yeah.
just so soulful.
All right, Chelsea, if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Chelsea Burton Dunn author. And then you can find links to all of that on my website, which is www.chelseaburtondunn.com. And you can also find me on my publisher's website for horsemanpublications.com.
Any final thoughts before I get you out of here?
No, just reading is powerful and wonderful. And I encourage everyone to listen and read to songs and music for the rest of their life. It's one of the most important things about being human is delving into art. And that's what books and music are. So,
Well said. Well said. I want to tell everyone to please go to the website, check out the books, let her know you heard about it on the podcast. I want everyone to remember that during these times, it can be very nerve-wracking and scary for both sides of the aisle. And during these times, I like to remind people that there is a good chance you've not read your favorite book yet. And that is alone enough to make you smile. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, listeners. Everyone, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Thank you,
yay.
ma'am. I hope you
Yeah,
had
thank you.
fun.
I had so much fun. Thank you.